Okay, so I'm gonna start. How to play a storm. My name is George. I'm from LARP, Bulgaria. I don't have an introduction slide, so I'll just speak a bit. Some of you know me, someone better than others. I'm a paramedic, mountain guide. I teach survival and self-defense. So I'm gonna share my experience with education techniques that I have used with LARP mechanics and the experience that I have used for LARPing for 10 years, 15 years.
You're older than you think.
Okay.
She's almost 15 though.
Okay. So, the plan is to give you the idea first, then to explain the structure that I used. Then maybe we can discuss the outcomes that were needed. And we can brainstorm and create some game design if you're willing to. Of course, before every plan, there is a problem, of course. So, what was our problem when we started all this? We were in Budapest 3 years ago on a project for disaster management and rescue. So we tried to organize a training regarding floods, because there is a nice river here that sometimes floods the city. So there were like all people gathered from different backgrounds, like firefighters, rescuers, municipality and Ministry of Interior people, like all of them. There were people from Croatia, from Bulgaria and some other countries. So it was a pretty big event and workshop. The idea was a tabletop exercise. There are two main approaches when you talk about disaster management and preparedness. So the first is called tabletop. It's when you have a map and you have certain teams of people. For example, they're responsible for the logistics. These are the firefighters, these are the rope rescuers, water rescuers, blah, blah, blah. So in a situation, they say, okay, this river is flooding the city, what will you do? And they start writing, like, my team will prepare this, this, and this. I will place them there, and they will do these tasks. Okay? And the other main approach is called a full-scale scenario. It's like a simulation. In my view, it's like a LARP, because you basically need to like evacuate half of the city, and you have a lot of people who like play concerned citizens, panicked citizens, and all other types of citizens that you have in a disaster. Yeah. Yeah. No. These are only two people, so it's it's not a problem usually. So. Full-scale scenarios are very good, but they're immensely expensive and difficult to organize because you need to engage like 10,000 people. We have made such in, I think it's in Slovenia, but it took like almost 2 years of preparation for a single day of event. So it's not the best thing.
Quick question.
Yep.
These two seem look like two extremes. Can you have something in the middle, like, I don't know, half scale scenarios?
You're talking about balanced exercise. With people who wear stars here, you cannot expect anything balanced. It is either this or this. Like, it's difficult sometimes. So yeah, one of the problems that we faced, because we made a workshop, I had to lead it. It was a tabletop, of course. The problems were boring. like very boring because people have done this like numerous times. And they just come and say, okay, we will place the firefighting cars here. Okay, we'll do this, and they just do it mechanically. They write all the stuff. On the end of the workshop, there is a summary. So you gather all of the information and the steps the teams wrote, and you create a roadmap. And with this roadmap, you say, okay, in case of flooding this particular city, these are the steps that you take. And they do this each, let's say, 2-3 years to update them. But it doesn't work. I mean, it's not effective. So we cannot see the invisible but the inevitable problems. The workshop that I had to make had a lot of people, so it was a bit of a mess organizing it. So at some point, we were given a map like this. This is not the map from the scenario because it's classified, but I found a random map on Google, which serves the purpose. So you have a city, you have the river, and you have certain zones that are marked with different colors. And when the exercise starts, you can say, for example, my team is responsible for, let's say, evacuation. So I will use this street to evacuate people to this area. Your team is responsible for, let's say, firefighting. So you say, okay, usually the fires that can start in after some disaster will be, let's say, in this area. That's why I will place my vehicles here in order to be able to respond if something happens. And usually we go around the map. So each team, we have big tables, so they can put sticky notes, like my team here, this is here, and that's pretty much how it goes. And they think that this is fancy and very nice, but but it's not effective. So we have a preset environment with predefined problems. So someone has said, okay, for example, on the map, here this is compromised, so this area is flooded, etc., and we have a list of problems. They are pre-written. They're as I said, usually the people know what the problems are, so it's very boring to just go with all the procedures. Now we do this and this and this and this. This makes the training ineffective, in my opinion. So I thought that we need adaptive and exciting problems, because no one loves boring problems. People love exciting problems. So I asked them, do you want to play a storm? I divided the people into teams. So half of them, or not exactly half of them all the time, they were playing the usual rescue part, while the others were playing the disaster. And they have never done that. But first we needed to explain what are the rules and how do they do that in order to achieve good training and good outcome. So what did we need? Goals and roles. The goal was obviously to make a disaster preparedness exercise. We needed roles because, as we said in the previous workshop, I'm very keen on the idea of using roles while making all types of education, because you need to preserve the ego of the people who are like learning something. And usually when we talk about active learning, people make mistakes. And you force them to make mistakes because the mistake is the best thing that can teach you something. Like if you come to my course, for example, I'll teach you CPR, and first I need to see how do you perform. So you come to my course, you perform the perfect CPR, I cannot teach you anything. Like, this course is not very valuable for you. But if you come to my course and you make 5 mistakes, it's perfect, because I can teach you different stuff, put you in different situations, tell you all about if you make mistake number 3, what can go wrong, or if you make a mistake number 5, what can go wrong. So I will teach you to not only the certain thing like CPR, but I'll teach you to think like logically, to create a mindset what can go wrong, which is a good thing. And especially in this case, when you work with military guys, firefighting guys, rescuers, blah, 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 roles and ego, very important, use roles, because some of them cannot deal well with mistakes, especially higher ranking people in government agencies, municipality agencies and whatever. They don't deal well with ego and compromised ego, and when they make mistakes, sometimes they are inclined to just argue that they're not wrong, even if they are. We needed expert knowledge. We have all the expert knowledge needed gathered around in a room, so it was perfect. We needed the environment. We had our map. Most of the people, they had received some material so they can prepare on this. But frankly, I think that most of them, they had the knowledge even without the materials, because like 10, 15 years of experience on that field. Timeline. This is something very important in tabletop exercises for disaster management. It's very important to make the people use a proper timeline. For example, I will place my rescuers here, and you put a sticker and say, this will take me between, let's say, 35 minutes to, let's say, 1 hour or hour and a half. Because if you need to place, let's say, 35 fire engines in the center of Zagreb in, let's say, 4 o'clock in the morning, it will take you approximately, let's say, 30 to 35 minutes. You'll take like a couple of vehicles from each station and they'll go in the center of Zagreb. But if you need to do the same at 5:30 on Monday, like in rush hour, it will take you like 2 hours, 2 hours and a half, maybe more, depending. So yeah, timeline is important because certain stuff need to happen, but if long time passes, they're not needed anymore. Especially when we talk about time-sensitive stuff like evacuation or something like this. Rounds. I realized at that moment that I need rounds of this exercise because usually it is like a one-time thing. So we gather in a room, we write the stuff, there are people who collect the data and they prepare the roadmap and that's it. We have a discussion afterwards, of course, on what can we add. So people add like 10 steps, we make a debrief, we add 5 more steps and we think that everything's perfect. But when I ask them, do you want to play a storm? I realized that it's a very good thing to make rounds so they can switch, so they can see how it's on the other side. And this was a very interesting decision for them because they weren't prepared for this. But actually they liked it a lot. And of course, the holy debrief at the end of everything. It's very important because during the process, a lot of discussions were like started but never finished because of the timeline, because they needed to act like now we need to do this and then some other problem occurred, so we needed to do the other thing, and there were like many questions without answers. And this was starting to create a tension, because at some point there were like lots of people with expertise in the same room, but they didn't have the time to actually discuss and to reach some solution. So, back on the map. After I created the teams, there was a team storm, of course, and we started again. This time, the rescuers said, as usual, of course, okay, we'll put the fire engines here, we'll make an evacuation point here, and we'll make a camp for, I don't know, logistics here, etc., etc. And then I made like turns. They do something and the environment responds. So the people who were on the other side, they said, okay, but not only this area is compromised by the water, but this area as well, so this street is flooded up to here. And you could see how all the people who have used to like put their stickers here, here, and here, they suddenly realized that this doesn't work anymore. So they had to like, oh fuck, if this is compromised, so this shouldn't be here, but let's say here. And my evacuation route changes from this side to this side. And the people from the other side of the river, they were like, oh fuck, so our setup doesn't need to be here, but there. So it was very interesting how they started to realize when the environment like starts to respond to reactions, that they face entirely new problems that they're invisible until that moment. But the thing is that when you use expert knowledge, these things are quite possible. So it's not like, for example, I take her and she's like, yeah, but here comes the dragon. Yeah, because in this setting it is like, it's not possible.
So they're giving something that is realistic to happen?
Yes.
Random things to beat the other team.
Yes, exactly. Their goal is not to beat the other team. Their goal is just to think of something that is possible to happen. Usually, when these scenarios are written, it's like, in terms of, let's say, logistics, you have these 10 problems. But you don't have like the 10 problems at once. And usually they address, let's say, the first one or the second one. And after that, in the roadmap, they write all of them. Which is fine, but in real situation, this doesn't work because this doesn't create the adaptive thinking in the people who manage the disaster. So again, when you have the op force, they can give you 2 of these problems in logistics, but when they decide when or where to give it, it makes the entire map look entirely different. And it was a very nice touch when at first people were like a bit angry and insecure, but afterwards they started thinking like what could actually happen. So there was a very nice moments. They were almost set up the entire thing, like the HQ, the logistics, the rescue teams, the logistics for them, the fuel delivery, the first aid camps, everything. And there comes a guy, I didn't know him, he was like chief of police of transport something. So he went out and said, hello, I'm traffic. and he started putting like sticky notes here, 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 on some places, and just said, and all the people like, oh fuck. So the guy later explains that, yeah, when you have a situation like this, it's quite normal, like you have lots of cars here. So someone tries to turn around, makes like a little car crash, like 2 vehicles like this, nothing else, like we're not talking about serious incident, but you forget driving on the streets for the next, let's say, half an hour. And you can have like in this area, because the water starts to go. So in this area you have like 3 or 5 main arteries, and he blocked 2 of them, for example, because it's realistic. To block all 5 of them would be like a bit too much, and every road to be clean again would be like unrealistic. So he did only 2. He decided which 2. I don't know how. Probably because out of his experience or something like this.
My response to you is, okay, I'm in the army and come and shoot all the...
Well,
So they don't stand in the way of saving citizens.
yeah, well, no, because it isn't realistic, and the thing is that they're not LARPers, so they are not prone to make such decisions and ideas. But yeah, actually, there was one of the rounds that they decided to include the army in terms of logistics, and one of the teams decided that almost 80% of the resources of the army, because they have like sheets. For example, if a disaster happens here, you can count on, let's say, 5,000 soldiers who can gather within an hour, let's say. So this is the resource that you have, and you have, let's say, 25 transportation heavy vehicles, and etc., etc. This is like a real data. Like, because you cannot say I have like 10,000 people and they just build the wall again, or you have like 150 buses, so I evacuate all the red area in 1 hour. You cannot, because there are like 20,000 people here, and there are measurements that if you need to evacuate it, you need like between 8.5 and 11 hours, for example. So you cannot go so unrealistic on that, because they're like data.
Also, if you shoot everyone, then nobody will drown.
So it was very interesting how this provoked them to think. And at some point, there was another problem that I didn't anticipate. Everyone wanted to play the storm. So what was the outcome? We created active learning environment. It was very nice and very useful for them. There were lots of in-game and off-game discussions. Like usually people, when they come to this tabletop, they just sit somewhere. They receive their sheet of tasks, because I'm responsible for the logistics and I don't care that he needs to put out fires. I'm a logistics expert, so I have my tasks or my problems and I just write what's going on with them. But when the environment started to respond, they started to gather and to discuss. Hey, I need to put several vehicles there. Can you tell me which route is like the safest option? Because I don't want to be stuck somewhere on the route. So there were like lots of in-game discussions, and after the debrief, lots of off-game discussions also were started, because people from different departments started to discuss like what has happened. Your guy that participated in the storm team presented a very interesting problem that we didn't realize that it's possible. But for the people who are very much into the topic, some stuff are just normal. Like, yes, this could happen. But the other people, they're like, they don't know this. Also, multiple education possibilities, because when we started to switch teams, the different points of view that people received from this revealed them a lot of chances to think it other way. And usually they're not used to that. It also provoked teamwork on a new level, because usually when such people gather, they're like, okay, we're experts in this, so whatever we do, they listen to our expertise and to what we're saying, and it's completely fine. But the thing is that disaster management is like a pretty much team effort, and sometimes even if you're expert on something, you need his expertise, her expertise on that. What can go wrong? How can we be of service to someone, etc., etc. This created new ideas of learning and problem solving, because when we finished the workshop, there were like already some departments who discussed how can they do this for their internal trainings. Like, first of all, it will not make them boring, because the word boring was like widely used, that's why I included it here. And next of all, they can make a very specifically targeted training. For example, I cannot do a specifically targeted training for, I don't know, for water rescuers, because I lack the knowledge. I can give them the idea and the structure and how to, but they need to involve the people who are reasonable enough and who have the expertise to play both parties. So, is it a LARP or it's not a LARP? We can debate on that later. We can debate on that later. All the things that we did were in terms of stress management, because every task that we did was a little bit time sensitive. Like when you're talking about disaster, timeline is like important, because it's one thing to evacuate people in 6 hours, or the other thing to say, okay, we evacuate you in 3 days, like stay there. And when something unexpected happens, people start to work under a lot of stress, because they have like teams of people who are responsible for this part of the map, which is like 25,000 people. So there is a lot of stress. There is a lot of other stress factors, like media, for example. At some point, there was a guy who was like, okay, I'm from the media. Can you tell me what's going on? And they were like, yeah, wait a minute. They know that such thing exists, but they haven't experienced it like in front of them. And after that, the idea of this structure, I want to incorporate in business development, strategy of education, because there are lots of different types of businesses and companies with specific problems that can use this structure and method to try to resolve or try to explore the possible problems that they can face in their work process. So stress management in business development, you can create an acronym on your own if you want with these words. So let's get to work. I personally searched all the internet, but I couldn't find more suitable photo. Like this photo is like marvelous. If someone is watching the stream, this is Ciro from Terrible Creations. So. So if you're inclined to, we can make a workshop. Like you can work on groups. I don't know, you can try to identify some problem from your line of work. I don't know what all of you are working, and you can define a problem, an environment, duration, how many people is feasible. This for because there are some stuff like disaster management. You can involve like a lot of people. Like we did the workshop with 45 people, and the other workshop that we did was nearly 60 people. So there are problems which are massive and they allow a lot of people to work on them. But if other problems exist, you can make this like with 4 people, for example. So depending on the problem that you want to solve. Very important is how you introduce this, because I had to introduce it to people who are not game-oriented at all, like never, at least in the last 50 years. So
Just call it interactive simulation and
exactly, yeah, something like this. So what game mechanics will you use? In my case study, we're using tabletop. In other case studies, like everything's possible. For example, I have discussed such a thing with a friend of mine who works in a bank. So they wanted to create a simulation, for example, where their internal system is not working, or their customer support system is not working, or something like this. So they wanted to like see how the process will go. And they were very interested with the idea that the problem is not like something that we predefine, but just say, okay, IT guys, think of a problem with the system. So, and create it, and the other people will have to think on the fly, what will they do, how will they react, and they will gather all the data, so they can say, in these types of problems, we can do this or this or this, like number of different solutions. And of course, very important, how will you debrief this? Again, I'll mention that I will do it in rows. Like every time I'll do it in rows, because when you're thinking about disaster management or any other company or, I don't know, corporation, there will always be like people with higher ranks. They're usually the decision makers. So it's a problem when these people have to make mistakes which affect others. Because in our case, you affect like virtual 25,000 people, but they're virtual. But if you make it like in your company, you'll play with your colleagues. And yes, you explore a problem, not like human interaction problems or personal problems, because I don't think it's about that. You explore some work-related problem. But still, you always have the people who are the decision makers, and you need to take care of their ego. Another idea that I can give, you can discuss some problem that happens on your workplace. So basically, this is our office and there is a fire in the office. This is a problem on our workspace. So how will all the people react? For example, she knows how to use fire extinguisher, or she thinks that she knows, for example. Or we can address it to some working process. Like there are lots of working procedures in companies that might use this idea to try to see how will they feel in some situation that just occurs. Or we can just discuss, or if you have any questions, you can just ask me. Thank you for now. Yes.
take yours. There is another one. Okay, so I think that this is genius. Overall, it is genius, and I think it worked really well. So far, I think it's, however, it is a simulation to which we could not add up a lot in terms of setting, because we don't have the competence to do that. So we don't have the knowledge that you do. But I do have a strong urge to talk about mechanics right now.
Okay.
If we go into the discussion, what is the difference between LARP and simulations, which I don't want to, maybe this kind of game, like most simulation, it lacks two things. It is game mechanics and this emotional impact that this kind of situation would have on the participants, in which LARP is very, this is a strong feature of the LARP. So, there is one mechanic I would like to propose you. It is not mine, it is Lubomir's. He came up with it with relation to military decision-making exercise.
Okay.
Imagine that there are two jars on the table, and each time a decision is made, the jars get filled with red balls or tokens or whatever for each casualty that this decision provoked.
Okay.
So seeing that the jar is getting filled literally with blood,
Okay.
you can reach this kind of emotional impact that the actual consequences of your decision measured in human lives would be.
Okay, this is very interesting because on some tabletop exercises, there is like certain points of the exercise where someone who has written the previous plan, let's say, can come and say, okay, but if you make this decision or you have made these decisions, this will cost you like, I don't know, let's say 10 people will die or something like this.
Yeah, but these are numbers, and you do need to do a little scenography with it, like someone completely silently come and fill a jar with blood. You know, so this could be very, I have played this game, and it is very stressful, and it is very emotionally impactful to see that your actions result in a bloodshed.
Okay, yeah.
And it could put this
nice,
level
yeah.
of stress and make these people realize better than seeing a number on the blackboard like that.
Yeah, you're right, because seeing numbers on is just...
Also, as we know, 10,000 is statistics.
Of
Three
course, yes.
3 is individuals that you killed.
Yes, that's right. Well, one of the things that we saw in Turkey when we were on the earthquake there was that most of these plans actually don't work so well as expected. Like I discussed with some of the local people like responsible for like disaster management, and they said, yes, we have plans. Like we have plans for like 50 years. We have updated them every 5 years as requested. We have plans for earthquakes, for fires, for floods, for everything in particular. But when this earthquake happened, they realized that most of the stuff there, they just don't work in real life how it's supposed to. And yeah, that made me also think that they need a way, a tool or a method to like try to simulate that. Yes, it's simulation. And I'm pretty well aware that we cannot make this for them because we lack the expertise. But as LARPers, we can give them the idea and the tool set to make this happen, because they lack the tool set, but they have the expertise.
Another thing that comes to my mind, because it all sounds like, as you used the word tabletop a couple of times, so I have strong associations with some board game mechanics, like for example cards for random factors, which would simulate the randomness of life, that something happened and it could not be predicted or prevented by anyone, because shit happens sometimes. And also cards with different, not only with random events, but also with likely and predictable events. And each card would have a price in human lives, because this would give the people the feeling that the game is honest. Because if you don't have this rule set, like for example, this random effect, if we don't react correctly, costs 5 lives. And you need to have this in advance, otherwise people would feel offended or cheated by the game masters, the literal game masters, and react, as you said, because of their ego. So this game needs to have very strict rules and mechanics. So this was my idea. The second one was not that well developed, but I think you get my meaning.
Yeah. Thank you. And okay, so can we involve the people, like the experts who play the storm in this creation of cards. Like, I don't know, as a workshop before the game, we can say, okay, you need to like think of certain stuff that might happen in like some random order, and you can like say, because again, there will be the experts who will say, if you cut down the electricity on this neighborhood, it might result in, let's say, 15 lives, because in this neighborhood there are 5 hospitals, and they have like a total of 55 beds in ICU. So if you cut down the power all at once, they will be like statistically, yeah, statistics is very important as well. There will be statistically chance of, let's say, 5 casualties, like around 10% when you need to evacuate these people from the ICU without their supporting machines or something like this. But it is something that only the experts can say how it will go.
Maybe the workshop before the game is a little bit late. Maybe some kind of preparation phase that would last several weeks, and after that you would finalize the design with the activities.
Okay, yeah, that can be done as well, I think.
And also that way they will feel very involved, because it will be a game that they have made actually.
Yes, and this can be done. I just make the case study because I have done this in terms of disaster management. It can be done by literally any problem or corporate problem or company training or whatever. Okay, thank you. It was very helpful. Anyone else? Yep.
It's something a bit different, so
Just-
I don't know if it's relevant. I hope.
Just we must use the microphone for the streaming.
Okay. Everybody hates that, right? I will sit here. So it's a bit different, so I hope it will be relevant. But we have experience in Belgium in some mass LARP
Okay.
that we had storm, for example, like a real storm or like a flood.
Okay.
And like nothing really bad happened. But when I heard your presentation, I thought it would be so amazing that the safety team could play those workshops, those games, to be more effective. So I was thinking how you can make it like in a really smaller scale, because it's not like most of the things are already under control. Like we have the Red Cross on site. Most of the time we have a nurse or a doctor, and it's just about those little things that we know that can happen. But when they happen, as you say, as your experience in Turkey, even if you have the scenario, when the thing happens, people panic or they are drunk or something. No, but that's true. That's a LARP, and many people are drunk. And we had the problem that a lot of people were doing a party, and it was very hard to make them understand that they couldn't stay under one of the tents because there was a real storm. And they had to go in other tents that were more secure. And so we, like, for example, we were talking also about the ego. I was like, you know, I'm a girl, I'm not very fit. And I had to go to these huge Viking guys to say, it's not safe here. And they were like, yes, it's safe here. And so I think like a briefing with like some people from each team that make this game like very, as you both said, like very realistic, with like everybody can play every role and be a storm or be the flood or be the, I don't know what, a fire.
Yes, because the interesting thing is that usually when when you create a game or something or some simulation, people love to make problems. Like if you tell someone, can you please create 10 problems for me for my game, he'll say, yes, I'll create 20. Like it's not a problem. But this is a single person, and sometimes he lacks the expertise to create something that will be actually useful. Because the idea is not that he is very good at his job and he wants to beat me. It's not about that. It's about the outcome and the educational purpose of this. I can give you some examples from our game that we do in Bulgaria. It's like the biggest game in Bulgaria and a couple of countries around it. It has like a couple of 100 participants. I'm one of the paramedics responsible on the field for safety, for fire safety, etc., etc. So we had a case last year. One guy had appendicitis, inflamed like, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, as you probably imagine, most of the people are drunk at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we had a not drinking, we have to have not drinking driver to drive him to the hospital. And at some point there were like very few people on the area responsible if something else happens there. So yeah, this can also, bless you, this can also be addressed like that. Since you have a safety team, of course they can train in such a way with the other, like, I don't know if you have lots of GMs or people in certain areas of the game. I don't know how it works. But yes, you can make such a training because the people responsible, for example, you're a GM, but you're not a paramedic. But just to create the awareness in you, like what can happen and how will you react if something like this happens. Like he's fighting in a mass battle, he falls and let's say he breaks his leg. It's very good that you should be aware that you don't need to move this person until the rescue team comes, because we have had cases, yes, his leg is broken and 5 very strong Vikings, they just grab him and carry him somewhere to the safety, which is a wrong decision in this particular situation. If someone has a fractured bone, you don't move him. And stuff like this. Okay.
Let's make a training for the GMs and LARP organizers in organizing the safety stuff.
Yes, we can. And we can invite famous players who had incidents but are still alive to share experience. Like,
You have to resurrect them.
yeah, it can be done. Like even in terms of LARPing, it can be done. Yeah, we can make a panel for that on next portal. Yeah. Next portal, because we're streaming, will be in Bulgaria, so you're all welcome 2024 in Bulgaria. Okay, in case there aren't any more questions or anything else, thank you for your attention.